Hello. Ooh. Pull my chair in here. My name is Sydney Winston. I'm an atheist activist out of Vancouver, Canada. I have some time to spare. If you do, if you have 30 to, I don't know, 45, 60 minutes, I want to share in review, a video that I just came across from Prophet of Zod. Now this here is Prophet of Zod. Very smart guy. Love his channel. It's called here we go. Prophet of Zod. I suggest you subscribe and watch a lot of his back videos. Brilliant stuff. But that's not where I want that. I'll delete that there. Okay, so again, why mess around? Let's get into it. There we go. Let's just fade me in like that. And now, pay close attention from the very beginning, because it starts off lots of action very quickly. Short scenes. Oh, you'll see what I mean. Pay attention.
Atheists.
Atheists.
Hi.
Thanks for clicking on this video. It means a lot to me, really. I'm a religious guy who's devoted my life to a God you don't believe in.
So you generally make good use of your time then?
So you're taking a bit of a risk here that I might insult you, make you feel bad about your life, or at the very least, waste your time.
Well, I'm aware there's an almost inevitable risk you might say something annoyingly pedestrian, and it looks like smarminess is already a given. But beyond that, you seem to be greatly overestimating your ability to make me feel bad or rope me into watching something I don't want to. So please, just take my word for it. I'm thick-skinned enough and good enough at stopping videos I don't see a lot of risk here. Thank you for your concern, though.
I really do appreciate it, and I hope not to do any of those things here. Rather, I'd like to pose a question to you. It's a very simple question, in fact. It is more of an exhortation from me to you. This question is not meant to trick you or convert you. I don't have some super ingenious question that will somehow...
Does he come across as condescending in some way, even though he's trying not to? With his, he's dressed like a nun, which is kind of weird. Why would a man dressed like a nun? But, he's obviously religious, so he's got his he's got his perversions. Oh, sorry, he's got his dogma. Sorry, I didn't mean that one slipped out. It's Freudian slip, I guess.
inspire faith in a deity.
Yeah, of course you don't. Just like none of the 100 apologists I heard before you didn't. Far from being, worried you'll turn me Christian with a brilliant question, I'd honestly be relieved to see you rise to the level of saying something that's not mundane, recycled, and totally confused about the basics of atheism. Maybe I'm overreacting, and maybe this is just your way of being nice. But this thing where you infantilize us by implying we're utterly vulnerable to you and then assuring us you won't take advantage of that vulnerability is not only obnoxious but kind of creepy.
Yeah,
And your
that's what I
syrupy
said.
southern fried bless your heart way of doing it just makes it worse.
Exactly. Yeah, he's onto it. He's onto this guy. I just want to take a moment here to introduce my new idea. For when I don't have forget about the hangout or the live room. The chat on the side there. There we go. Let me just cut it in. The chat on the side, which is, you can see there, I can interact with people now in the side chat. If nothing else is happening, then we can interact this way. New innovation. So for coming up, especially for the coming up ones where it's scheduled and it's a live stream anyway. So that was just for further information. Public service announcement brought to you by moi. So let's get back to the prophet.
If you want to talk to us like we're grown-ups.
I'd rather just like to challenge you. You say that you're an atheist, that you don't believe in gods, and I just want to know one thing. Are you a good one? Are you a good atheist?
Okay, so speaking of infantilizing, now he's expressing some kind of fatherly-sounding concern over whether I'm a good atheist. As if I might have just been floating around never having considered what kind of atheist I am until an actual real-life priest alerted me to the possibility that I should think about being a good one. I mean, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but just imagine if I'd made a video being like, I just want to challenge you. You say that you are a Christian, that you believe in God, and I just want to know, are you a good Christian? Doesn't that just sound incredibly patronizing? Especially approaching the Christian community as an atheist? God, give people a little credit.
No shit.
But beyond that, it's just a weird question.
It is.
As an atheist, I'm just a person who doesn't believe in God. In fact, you just defined me that way yourself. So why are you asking if I'm a good person who doesn't believe in God? Why not just ask if I consider myself a good person and leave it at that?
Exactly. Yes.
I mean, it would sound weird if I ask you whether you're a good person who doesn't believe in vampires, right?
Yes.
That's because you recognize that the simple fact that someone proposes a supernatural phenomenon doesn't in any way make the quality of you as a person hinge on your disbelief in it.
Exactly. And this is the problem I have with every Christian on this planet who thinks that they're high and mighty, above us all. They know something we don't know. I tell you.
This might sound like a nitpicky point, but the fact that you approach us asking whether we're good people who don't believe in your favorite thing, and even consider this a form of exhortation, seems to indicate you think either that your favorite thing is so foundational to the quality of a person's character that it bears explaining how non-believers manage to be good without it, or that it's so compelling that people should account for how good a job they do not believing in it. So there are some unconstructive and possibly ugly presumptions behind this question, and I think it was worth bringing them to the forefront before moving on.
It's a question that I ask with two things in mind. The first being related to morality. While religion in general, and Christianity in particular, doesn't necessarily make someone a moral person, these ways of life do necessarily demand morality of adherence.
Well, if they demand morality of adherence, then why are there so many flagrant violations of that adherence to morality? If that is so important, if it is so written in stone, why are there so many violations? Mr. Young Christian convert to atheism, those who he speaks to wannabe. But I think Prophet of Zod has got your number. So let's carry on.
There's a particular code of life that one must live. In the case of Catholic Christianity, that code is one of peace and justice, mercy and forgiveness. It's a code that seeks to care for the poor and seek reparations for those who take advantage of the vulnerable.
Let's just stop you right there for a moment. Your code is a code of a lot of things, and peace, justice, mercy, and forgiveness are just a few of them. That's because your code's based on the assertion that God wants whatever the church says he wants and that his desires constitute morality. And since this assertion can justify literally anything, some of what your code has demanded has been good, some has been horrible, and some has been silly nonsense. Yet in spite of all this variety, you have the presence of mind to recognize that peace, justice, mercy, forgiveness, and caring for the poor have a demonstrably positive impact on the well-being of others in society. And since concern for this, rather than your code, is what truly defines morality, you isolate the few parts of your code that explicitly promote well-being and try to pass them off as the only thing your religion demands of people. Then you congratulate your religion for supposedly owning values that progressive concern for humanity actually came up with and pressured your religion into steering toward. But the fact that you can slyly sneak the nice parts of your religion's code to the forefront while shuffling its bad or silly parts off to the side does not make your code good. And it most certainly does not make it the most parsimonious or reliable path to humanitarian values. Think about why you didn't come at us boasting of Catholicism's anti-LGBTQ teachings, elaborate rituals, reliance on sacraments, or patriarchal values that have fostered and defended violations of the vulnerable, just to name a few things, and you'll recognize that the values you did emphasize are good for reasons disconnected from and often contradicted by parts of your code.
Now, Lord knows we don't always live up to our founder and have actually done some pretty atrocious things through the years, but it is our faith that at least informs us when we do these things and gives us and reminds us a moral code to live by, reminds us that it's not an option.
Recognizing the impact my actions can have on others is what guides me and tells me that decent and kind actions are non-optional. Is that not enough for you? Are you so dependent on your religion's code that you think kicking a baby to death would be an option without it? Or do you recognize that kicking a baby to death would be terrible because of the effect it would have on the baby?
Indeed.
And would this basic obligation to the child's well-being not only suffice but actually trump the teachings of your religion if the two ever came into conflict?
Yes.
If not, you're a dangerous psycho. If so, the compulsion to be moral exists with or without your religion, meaning your religion is at best extraneous to and at worst a distraction from it.
Not only is he a dangerous psycho, he's a dangerous psycho wearing a dress, coming across as a religious man in a dress. Does something seem dodgy to you?
So why not just be decent for explicitly understood humanitarian reasons instead of trying to launder decency through your religion?
Exactly.
Unless you're trying to sneak the more insidious parts of your code past us while parading the nice ones in front of us. And by the way, your founder, assuming that you mean Jesus, taught a lot of things other than kindness, expected cult-like allegiance of his followers, and threatened to eternally torture people who aren't explicitly thankful for the sacrifice he arbitrarily decided to expect of himself before forgiving us. So honestly, I think we're both more than living up to his example.
We must strive to be good people. Now, as someone who doesn't have this foundation, who doesn't believe in a God or adhere to a religion, there is no superstructure.
How is he defining good people? Okay, a good person is a person with a good heart, with a good intent, with a good demeanor, with a good positive, not necessarily upbeat, but not necessarily bringing everybody down all the time. Which is kind of precisely what Christianity does, brings people down. I mean, look at what it's done to Gary Milne. Look at what Christianity's done to G-Man and Shannon Dornbush and Jason Egroff and Evan Phillips. Look what Christianity has done to them, especially to Gary Milne and to Artangelo. My God, these people have got twisted, perverted minds. But they'll come and defend themselves, all in good time.
Structure, making this demand on your life. No one telling you how to live in certain situations.
What? What are you talking about? There are actually a lot of people telling me how to live in various situations. But two things. First, I don't need them to tell me how to behave, since I'm not 5 years old, and I instead incorporate their guidance into my growing understanding of constructive and compassionate behavior. And second, the people I take seriously give good reasons for what they tell me instead of just saying God told them I have to do things. So maybe you should ask me what superstructure makes demands of me instead of just telling me I have no such superstructure. You might just learn I actually do have one. It's just more nuanced and makes more sense than yours. But maybe that's why it's easier just to say I don't have one.
Without a belief in an afterlife, there might be a feeling that all the world is futile, so what difference does it make?
There might be a feeling that everything's futile without an afterlife. But that's not the case for me because, again, I'm not 5 years old.
There you go.
To start with, I understand the math of the situation well enough to recognize that a few decades of life is worth more than 0 decades of life, even though it's not infinity life.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I'm not a sociopath, so I care about others.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I have enough compassion for my children that I want their lives to be good after I'm dead, even though I won't be there to see it.
Fair enough.
If you can't get your head around, or don't care about, the possibility that your behavior will continue to impact others after you're gone and thus can't see the point of anything unless you're motivated by an afterlife in which you're rewarded, then you should really spend less time fretting over how good I am and worry about yourself instead.
This, of course, does not need to be the case. Some of the world's greatest humanitarians, some of the most influential figures today promoting peace and justice efforts, are not adherents to a religion, but live morally out of a commitment to humanity, a recognition of our interconnectedness, an acknowledgement that there is something good in itself about loving one another, about sacrifice. And so I ask you,
What's that got to do with religion? Loving one another, la-di-da, what sacrifice? Yeah, okay, sacrifice and compromise. Maybe he's talking about when it comes to, the closer you are to people, the more you kind of have to compromise with them. But, the closer you live with them, I hope. I don't know. I think you understand what he's trying to say. I think I understand what he's trying to say. But it's got nothing to do with religion. Especially got nothing to do with the God of religion, or his God of religion, who's an evil cunt.
are you a good atheist?
Yes.
Even though there may be no eternal reward?
It's irrelevant. Good atheist, good person. What do you mean, good atheist? There's no such... A good atheist is one who is an atheist and says he's an atheist. What kind of a question is that?
Or punishment, even though you're free to do whatever you want. Do you choose the virtuous path that benefits not only you, but others?
Virtuous?
I hope so.
What's that?
So after...
Hold on. What does he mean by this? Virtuous path. Now he's bringing religion and virtuous into the same sentence as if there's some kind of correlation. I don't see it.
After having confessed that your understanding of morality is so stilted that you need commands from God to conceptualize it and the motivation of an ultimate reward to execute it, you're hopeful that we at the grown-up table are living up to our much more intelligent and altruistic reasons for decent behavior.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess. And I didn't put it that way to be rude. That's honestly the picture you're painting. And I'm not sure why we should be taken to task by someone who admits to approaching morality the way you do. Honestly, this video is starting to sound more and more like an unintentional extended self-own.
Isn't it? Isn't it?
The world needs good atheists. Now, of course, the word good points to more than just a sense of morality. It also represents an evaluation of aptitude. When I ask if you are a good atheist, I want to know if you're good at being an atheist. Do you articulate why you don't believe in God in a coherent way?
Yes.
Or you just think that religion's dumb, so use logical fallacy?
No. Religion's got nothing to do with the God you're talking about, okay? Now you are committing a fallacy. With that smirk and smugness on your face. Let's hear the end.
Have you explored the depths of your mind and heart, asking the real questions of life, of death, faith, and reason, seeking to understand what this human life is really about? You just not want to go to church, so...
Are you being serious, young man? You probably still live at home or something. I mean, you're what? 22, 23? And here you're sitting there asking me if I've asked the deep questions of life? Are you serious? This is like a comedy show. I think Prophet of Zod at the end, I haven't watched this, but I think Prophet is going to laugh his head off at you, or he's going to tear your head off your shoulders, figuratively, of course.
So this'll do.
What kind of patronizing bullshit-loaded questions are these?
There you go.
Asking if people are good at not believing your favorite paranormal claim is as silly as asking if they're good at not believing in Bigfoots or UFOs or vampires.
Mm-hmm.
And that's bad enough as is. But when half your question is, or do you just use fallacies and not want to go to church, you're being a passive-aggressive and what you're doing is pretty obvious. Basically, this is a false dichotomy meant to shift the burden of proof, implying that we have to spend a lot of time pondering your unproven claim, or else we're overly dismissive, fallacious, and lazy. But this is completely backward.
Isn't it?
If you have a claim you want people to believe in, then try to convince them. Don't sit there and demand they engage in endless reflection and research before not believing what you never troubled yourself to show them. This entitled way he's approaching people is just audacious.
Isn't it?
People don't expect you to do a bunch of homework before not believing in vampires. They don't expect you to explore the depths of your mind and heart before not believing in UFOs. They don't have an expectation for how everybody in the world should articulate why they don't believe in Bigfoot. So why demand all this of people before they don't believe in your favorite thing?
Yes.
Have you read the critical atheist thinkers of history? People like Nietzsche, Sartre, Feuerbach, Heidegger, people who really ask the challenging questions, who pose thoughtful insights of the world.
He's making it sound like challenging questions as if there's something to find out that we don't know, that we can never know, that is impossible to exist, but we have the answers because we are the Catholics. I'm so scared. Catholics are scary, aren't they? They're fucking creepy. Look at this guy.
Just stick with people like Richard Dawkins, people who provide great...
Just stick with people like Richard Dawkins. What the fuck you... I'm going to smack you, young man. Say that one more time.
sound bites for the cause, yippee, but do little to add anything to the world other than strawman arguments and divisiveness.
See, now he's making ridiculous claims. Now he's lost. Now I think Prophet Ozod is going to smack it out of the park. What do you think?
And here we go.
Yeah.
The potentially endless, ever-shifting appeal to things you should have read before not believing Christians' undemonstrated claims. And he presents it once more in terms of a false dichotomy by dividing atheists into two camps, one of which has read a lot of old books that few people will likely have read, and the other that mindlessly repeats sound bites from angry reactionaries. But there's a lot of room between these two camps. Maybe a lot of people have good reasons for not believing in God without having read all or even any of those books. Maybe a lot of ideas in them have trickled down into and even been further refined by ongoing discussion within the atheist community. Maybe people don't need to fully read these books themselves to access these ideas, and you demanding that they trudge through old, imposing tomes is just an attempt at making the price of admission for being an informed atheist so high that few people will reach it, and you can try to make the rest feel silly. Maybe your list can always change so that meeting your expectations of a well-read atheist is impossible. Maybe it says a lot about your motivation that you don't ask all the people in your pews why they didn't read all these books before converting. And maybe the fact that you still think Dawkins is everybody's favorite shows that you're 5 to 10 years out of touch with the atheist community you think you're talking down to, so lecturing us about how informed we are has a massively comical boomer vibe to it. Yeah. It all boils down to this simple fact. If you tell me something exists, I don't have to read a stack of books before not believing you. I bet you'd recognize that a ufologist making the same demand of you would be totally uncalled for.
Out of the ballpark.
So the fact that you don't recognize it's uncalled for when you do it just shows how entitled you are.
Have you read for yourself the works of real theologians, people articulating our beliefs in the best way we know?
Whoa. Real theologians. As if theology is a real thing. Theology is just learning fairy tales and made-up fiction stories and repeating them. So what's a real theologian? If everything is all made up, and he knows it, we know it, he knows it, if everything's all made up, then what's a real theologian versus a not real, false, or less than real theologian? I tell you what I think here. This guy is doing a job interview. He's selling himself. He's selling his creed. He's selling his church. He's selling his infrastructure in order to gain lifelong employment. That's it. That's what he's doing. He's a lazy bastard. He won't get a real job. He's looking to do this for a living.
How? Karl Rahner, John Henry Newman, Joseph Ratzinger, Augustine of Hippo, Henri de Lubac? Or do you stick with the simplicity of evangelical pastors from some rural anti-intellectual church?
Okay, what are real theologians?
Yeah, I called it.
A real chemist produces demonstrable results in chemistry. A real astronomer can make verifiable observations and theories about what we see in outer space. A real engineer can... Just kidding, I'm not seriously going to keep going. I know you get the point, which is that you only differentiate a real from a fake anything by how well they get tangible results. There are no tangible results in theology because nobody can show us anything about the nature of God, and thus there are no qualifications for a real theologian. So when someone like Father Kenobi here contrasts real theologians with fake ones, all he can be referring to is the people who articulated his favorite version of a made-up thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I really don't care who made something up in your favorite way. Until you can show me what God is and how they accurately described it, it's pointless. I also don't care who's making things up in the most interesting and articulate way, and I don't care who does it in the middle of a fancy university versus who does it over the pulpit of a country church.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, the second group may sound a little more rough around the edges when they do it, and the first might be more articulate about how they weave excuses. But in the end, you're both talking about an invisible disembodied spirit being you can't show me. So you don't sound smarter by as wide a margin as you think, and sometimes your elaborate obfuscating pretension sounds even dumber. Either way, throwing rural Christians under the bus like you did was kind of bullshit.
I ask all of this not to be accusatory, at least not overly accusatory, but to simply challenge you to go deeper in your thought.
You don't know how deep in thought I've gone, so don't presume to lecture me about going deeper.
Yes, exactly.
Simply declaring yourself an atheist and going about your life isn't enough, just as saying you're a Christian and never reading the Bible wouldn't be enough.
No, this is just wrong. People can simply declare themselves non-believers and vampires and just go on with their lives, right?
Yes.
So why can't they do the same with your favorite thing? The onus is on the person who does believe in vampires, just as it should be on people who believe in invisible disembodied spirit beings.
Ask more questions. Read more perspectives.
The Christian said to the atheist without noticing the irony.
Be able to articulate your understanding of the world with logic and reasoning that will actually add something to the world. Because here's the thing. People of faith need you to be good atheists.
No. People of faith need fundamentally better epistemology. Otherwise, they would be people of something other than faith.
We do. As a Christian, I don't...
You know what he's saying? We need you to be good atheists. We need you to not attack our Christian ideas. They are stupid and dumb and silly, but we need you to leave them alone and stop ridiculing them because it makes us feel very embarrassed.
I don't want you to be a bad atheist with an unexplored mind just regurgitating fallacies.
Wow! I got, that's it. I got no words.
I want you to ask questions that we've never thought to answer.
And I want you to stop answering questions you should still be asking.
I want you to be so smart that it challenges us to be smarter.
I want you to recognize something that should challenge you to be smarter when you see it.
As crazy as it sounds, I would much rather you be a good atheist than just an atheist.
Do you think the world is so full of just atheists that we need you to swoop in and exhort us to be good atheists? I mean, sure, let's all encourage each other to be better, but your way of going about it is just patronizing and aggressively directed toward people you disagree with.
And so that is my humble message to you, from one believer to a non-believer. We may not agree on much, but that doesn't mean that we don't need each other or can't learn something from one another. We do, and we can. Peace and good to you, Father Casey.
Yeah, it wasn't
Father
a humble
Casey.
message. Not at all. It was an arrogant message that talked down to us like we were children,
Yes.
using jabs that were all the more off-putting because you tried to hide them behind a smarmy, gentle demeanor.
Exactly.
Look, you might be used to talking to people this way. Those in your religion might call you Father, and you might get met with such automatic deference that you start to think people are going to feel lucky when you dole out little bits of your wisdom, or smile like adoring children every time you verbally pat them on the head and bless their little hearts. But that tone doesn't come off well with those outside your religion. It doesn't soften the presumption of telling them to be moral for reasons they've internalized yet you seem baffled by, or of chiding them to study to your satisfaction before not believing what you've never demonstrated to them. The fact is that you, sir, are woefully unequipped for talking to people outside your faith.
Absolutely.
There's a massive communication barrier between you and those who speak to each other like normal, mutually respecting adults. And I hope that those who are doubting or recently out of your religion see your tactics for what they are and have the confidence not to be shamed by them.
Yes.
And shifting to those in my audience, you don't need to feel guilted by this kind of talk. Regardless of the tone, even if it has the loving feel of a parental figure trying to guide you back to the faith as if you'd been lost. Hopefully this reply did something to help you see that, especially if this ever comes from people you know.
Well said. Well done, Prophet of Zod. Well said. All right, so now, this is not over, my fellow viewers. I'd like to recognize those in the chat. I'd also like to let you know that this is, if we don't have a meet group, a live meet group going where people can meet, well, we can still interact with this chat. So let me first recognize David S 11131113. Hello, seen you before. Welcome back. God equals the square root of -1. Hello, welcome back. Mr. Lumpkin, first time I've seen that name. You must be new. Welcome to the club. So, let's see. With the history of the Catholic Church, which still goes on today, I don't need any lectures from them about goodness. Totally. I mean, can you believe the cheek of that little kid with his dress and his pedo robe or his flasher robe, whatever he wants to do, whatever he thinks his future is. I mean, the guy doesn't even shave. He's so young. The robe and sandals tells me that his thinking may be antiquated. Yes, because the Catholic Church stopped thinking around the time of the Reformation. So his thinking is, I don't know, 500 years behind the rest of us, something like that. Either that or he buggers children. Well, he certainly looks eager to get to work as a Catholic priest. If I saw anybody else walking around in a robe today, I'd say, oh, there's a pedo. Well, yeah, why not? I mean, Catholic priests wear robes. Catholic priests are drawn to the priesthood because it's a palace of pedophilia. That's why. Perhaps if I read real experts of Lord of the Rings, I would come to believe in elves and dragons. Yeah, good point. If you read a book, and let me put this to you. How many times have you actually read a book like Lord of the Rings or anything? I used to do this when I was younger. Read a book, and while you're reading the book, you're kind of in the book. You know, you're part of the book. Even though it's fiction, mostly it was fiction. Even the emotion, you get sort of entwined with the characters, especially a good writer, right? I used to read these David Grisham and Leon Uris and these guys with these big, huge novels and sequels, and I'll date myself a little bit. When I was a young kid, it was Bigglesworth, the pilot in the First World War. But you put yourself into the situation that the character's in, and it's like watching a movie except reading it. So if you haven't read the book, you can't put yourself in that situation in your mind. And I think that's what Mr. Lumpkin is saying. If you haven't read the Bible, firstly, it's fiction, and secondly, you have to kind of put yourself in that story to sort of feel it. Now, it's not a very well-written series of literature. It's old, yes, but it's not particularly well-written. It doesn't really mesh together into one contiguous story. That's because it was made up over so many hundreds of years, and by many different authors. Finally, when they started to write it down, but over multiple generations, it was an oral tradition. Got mixed up, and listen, it's an absolute shame that the coincidence of history that when the Roman Empire fell, the Catholic Church had an infrastructure that was the only infrastructure at the time when the Roman Catholic Church fell. When the Roman Empire fell. That the Catholic Church, being the structure that it was, strong, was able to keep it together, and maintain some kind of cohesion within itself, so that society at large would have a leader, because the Roman Empire was gone. There was nothing. There were no states, nothing. In the very beginning, they were in the mid 400s, when the Western Empire finally said that's it, and then I guess the Holy Roman Empire took over, but that's a whole different story. So that's it. This is the way we're going to interact, is with me here and you there in the chat, and that's the way it's going to have to work. Because unless I open up a meet room, and then we can all come in and have a chat, but that hasn't really, it's worked out well once or twice, but I've tried it a few times. It doesn't always work out well. So it's possible that it's the timing. My timing's off. Let me read some more. David says, the thing is, 200 plus years ago, people were ignorant enough to believe the crap in the Bible. And today, there's no excuse. I agree with you 100%. There's no excuse to believe that crap in the Bible, other than you have an ulterior motive like profit, or you have an unfounded fear of something like death, or you're just too chicken, you're just too cowardly to face the fact that you're going to die, that you're not that you're mortal, you're going to die, there's going to be nothing left of you one day. That seems to be what the thing is. Christianity is for cowards. Michael W. Robel, welcome. First time I've seen your name. This dude works for a church that employs an official exorcist. Bingo. This dude's Catholic, works for a church that employs an official exorcist. That's what I think that's what the Vatican does, have an official exorcist. Can you imagine? Think of the easiest job in the world. It's this type of job. pastor, priest, minister, bullshitter. God equals the square root of -1. I really like that name, by the way. Benefits of atheism. Being totally immune to voodoo, demonic possession, witchcraft, and hexes. Other benefits include not being emotionally blackmailed by some religious creeps with guilt and fear, which is what that religious creep, that young kid, was trying to do to the people who were watching his bullshit performance. He should be embarrassed. Embarrassed for that. I hope his parents don't know what he's doing, because they would be embarrassed for him, wouldn't they? So I got to do something, because I don't know how current we are here. Hold on a sec. I'm just trying to figure out the live stream and me, how much of a lag there is. So I got to do something, because I don't know how. I'd give it there's about a 20-second delay. So whatever I say and whatever you write, well, I'll see what you write right away, but whatever I say, you won't hear for 20 seconds after I say it, which is really relevant to anything at all. And I'm just trying to kill time while I wait for the next respondent. Troy Bruns, welcome. Dirth Dawkins is getting more and more crazed. Do you think our pressures are getting to him? Good question. Do you think our pressures are getting to him? I think that more and more of us, more and more frequently, are starting to live rent-free in Darth Dawkins' head. Gary is full of us all the time. He wakes up angry. We're in his mind all the time. Yes, I do think we're getting to him. I think we're getting to Canadian Catholic as well. Have you seen him lately? He looks a mess. He looks like Canadian Catholic. Looks like Aaron Rod took him, dumped him in a mop bucket, and used him to clean the floor. That's what Canadian Catholic looks like these days. But that's my perspective. What is the friar's problem that would lead him to take a vow of celibacy? Well, there could be many problems. None of them, I don't think, are healthy. And I think that Friar Tuck, with his smirky smile, is hiding some very, very dark issues. Because that's not normal to sit around wearing a dress, talking nonsense about things that are neither relevant nor make any sense. I don't know what he means by, we demand that you be good atheists. He didn't really get there. CC is a mess. Canadian Catholic is a mess lately. I went on and started debating him, and he just kicked. Yeah, you know why? Because he's got nothing. He's been deflated before he even got. Well, I shouldn't say before. He got his head inflated, huge, and then it got popped by the atheists, and he's still reeling from that. He didn't think life was going to be this cruel, did he? David says they're not celibate against buggering kids. Oof, I know. It's, when you say something like that, it makes me wonder. They go through all this training, all this discipline about God and what God wants, and the books and what the stories mean, and the morality and this and the other, that you'd think that they felt that there is compelling evidence that there is a God, and they would live accordingly, as just like you live according to the law of the land, that if you kill somebody, you know that you're going to, it's not going to go good for you, right? So you don't kill people because it's not going to go good for you. So you'd think that the priests would have the same conscience, excuse me, and think that, okay, well, if I bugger little kids, God's not going to like that. He's going to punish me, so I'm not going to bugger little kids. You'd think that would be their rational reaction. But no. It's rampant across the world that these Catholic priests obviously don't believe in God, because if they did, they wouldn't do these ungodly things, which proves even more so to this little smoky kid who we just watched earlier that there is no God. That we can even tell that you guys, you Catholics, yourselves don't believe in any God. Now don't come and try and sell your bullshit to me. Where was I? A recent study showed that conservative/religious people were more likely to adopt solutions of convenience rather than accuracy. Yeah, I absolutely believe it. Absolutely. It's more like solutions of excuses. David says, funniest thing about Canadian Catholic is he's trying out Darth tactics. I know. But have you seen, he's such an ass licker to Darth Dawkins. Darth Dawkins has abused him. I've even made a video or whatever. It's in my archive somewhere. That Darth Dawkins absolutely abused. Gary abused Canadian Catholic. Literally. You're told to shut up and you're nonsense and I'll leave your server and overtalk me once again. The whole thing. And still Canadian Catholic kisses Darth Dawkins' ass. Like you say, trying to use his tactics. It's failing him. It's absolutely failing him. New atheist. I guess this is the definition of a new atheist. A skeptic whom the Catholic Church no longer has license to set on fire. The Catholic Church apparently still has license to set anybody on fire, but through their extreme, merciful graciousness, they decline. But they certainly could, because God says they can. I mean, they used to, right? We don't know that they still don't, because look what happened to a lot of those kids at the residential schools up in Canada. Here in Canada, I should say. Catholic residential schools murdered children, buried them in unmarked graves. Hundreds of them. And this is just one school. What an ugly word. Turning on the South Park episode Red Hot Catholic Love right now. I haven't watched South Park for years. I'm so far behind on all this stuff. Not in this country, what? Oh, to set on fire, not in this country? Too bad. Yeah, that's the Kamloops school, David. That was nuts. All right, let's see what we're doing for time. We're on 50 minutes of live stream. that's about enough, I'd say. This is fun in the chat. Again, this is all a bit of proof of concept here, because if I open up a room and people don't come in, which is by far the my experience, based on attempts to open up a room, then I think this is going to be the secondary way of communicating. First, primary way, of course, is open up a meet room and invite everybody in. Here you come on in, let's chat. But the failing that, this is the secondary, this is the fallback, plan B, is use the chat, the side chat for communicating. So there you go. I am going to end it right here. I'm going to say thank you to everybody who stuck around, who endured me for almost an hour. Woo! And we will see you next time, which should be soon. Thank you for watching.